Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is Explanation of Battle Through the Heavens episode number 156 based on novel. So let's start. Xiao Yang was seated on a stone bed within the quiet room. His eyes were tightly shut and waves of frighteningly high temperature continued to spread from his body. There was vaguely some dense white fire seedlings fleeing from the pores all over his body. These flames lingered over the place and wrapped around Xiao Yang's body. Xiao Yang's expression was calm and without any ripples. He did not sense the change around him. At this moment, his mind was completely immersed within the strange heavenly flame merger within his body. Perhaps it was because Xiao Yang was currently in control of 3 types of heavenly flames, but his current refinement of the bone-chilling flame was not as difficult as he had imagined. Under the intense burning of the 3000 Lotus Heart Flame, the bone-chilling flame already began to vaguely show signs of merging. Although this sign was extremely slow, everything progressed smoothly. There was no unusual changes that was difficult to control appearing. Based on this speed, if nothing unexpected occurred midway, Xiao Yang had the confidence that he could successfully refine the bone-chilling flame within a month. At that time, his body would be in possession of 4 types of heavenly flames. If word of this mysterious thing was to spread, it would likely attract the envy of quite a number of experts. It was already a great blessing for an ordinary person to obtain even one heavenly flame. This so-called 4 types was indeed a little bizarre. After all, even if one put aside the difficulty of finding a heavenly flame, it was likely that no one would dare to keep 4 types of heavenly flame that were filled with destructive strength within their body at the same time. Such an act was basically no different from swallowing a couple of bombs into one's stomach. It was a suicidal act in the eyes of many people. Fortunately, for Xiao Yang, who possessed the flame mantra, this kind of thing, which was impossible in the eyes of others, had become a foundation that allowed him to become a top expert. While Xiao Yang's training gradually progressed on the right track, the temperature of the quiet room also began to increase. At the end, those slowly lingering sandalwood fragrance emitted a puff and directly turned into dust. Under that temperature, even an ordinary elite dozong would not be able to stay for long. If one was to absorb the wild and violent energy that permeated the air, it was sufficient to cause the do qi within one's body to become violent and uncontrolled. Following the flow of time, the aura that spread from Xiao Yang's body also slowly became stronger. Waves after waves of majestic do qi spread out from his body like a great ocean wave. It even brought about some vague crashing sound in the process. With the merger of the bone-chilling flame and the 3000 Lotus Heart Flame, the enormous energy hidden within it had transformed into a pure do qi that poured into Xiao Yang's veins after refinement, causing his aura to slowly rise. Half a month passed by in the blink of an eye under this quiet refinement. After half a month of refinement, the temperature within the quiet room had already been raised until a terrifying level. Moreover, due to this place being completely sealed, it had ended up becoming like a steamer. Qi wave churned and the hot temperature caused numerous dark black crack lines to appear in the sky. Some stone tables and chairs within the quiet room had gradually melted, turning into liquid that slowly dripped down and flowed within the quiet room. Occasionally, an air bubble would appear along with a slight muffled sound. Nearly half of the stone bed had also melted under this high temperature. Xiao Yang, who was seated at its middle, however, did not show any signs of awakening. His breathing was calm. The hot air, which would cause an ordinary person to turn into ashes upon inhalation, became just like 2 air dragons that followed his nostrils and continuously enter his body. Clatter. The stone table melted and liquid dripped quietly. A slight V sound appeared within the quiet room with a rhythm. That stone bed's human figure appeared to have become a statue. It did not react even a little. If it was not because one could still sense a vast and mighty aura that continuously rose, it was likely that anyone would treat the hot wave like a stone statue. The concept of time would become extremely blurry while one trained. Hence, another 10 days had passed while Xiao Yang was seated like a statue. Flower fragrance covered a quiet courtyard. These beautiful and colorful flowers decorated the place until it was full of life. There was a stone pavilion within this courtyard. 3 figures were present within it. However, at this moment, the eyes of these 3 people were staring at a tightly shut stone door at the end of the courtyard. It is almost a month. Why has Xiao Yang not come out? Nalan Yangran looked at the stone door. Her brows were knitted as she softly commented. Yun Yun shook her head slightly and said, "There is no need to worry. With his ability, it is likely that nothing will happen. It is not rare for an elite dozun to undertake a couple of months or half a year retreat." Although she spoke in this manner, there was still a faint trace of worry between Yun Yun's brows. If it was an ordinary retreat, she would naturally not be worried. However, ever since Xiao Yang had entered the quiet room, the energy that spread from it became increasingly hot and violent. That feeling was as though the interior of the quiet room was brewing a volcano that was about to erupt. This kind of prelude really caused one to feel uneasy. This kind of unexpected change naturally also stirred the attention of some elders within the flower sect. Although they did not say anything, Yun was aware that their hearts were also worried. After having experienced the terrifying fire lotus that Xiao Yang had used back then, they were really a little afraid that Xiao Yang would cause another earth-shaking destruction and turn this flower sect into ruins. This fellow really does not allow others to relax. Yun involuntarily rubbed her brows as her heart laughed bitterly. In order to calm the worry of these elders during this period of time, she had did quite a lot of talking. However, this could not go on forever. The energy that was spreading from the quiet room was becoming increasingly violent. At that time, it was likely that even First Elder would adopt some measures. Compared to the worry of the other two, Qinglin merely leaned lazily on a pillar. Her soft, seemingly boneless waist and her body was leaned into an alluring arc that vaguely emitted a kind of lazy enchantment. She was born with unusual eyes. Naturally, she was aware of Xiao Yang's current condition. Hence, she was not worried for no reason. It seems that things are going to be the same again. Forget it, let's leave. After waiting quietly for over an hour, Yun looked at the sky before helplessly getting up and said, "What is it?" Nailin Yangran also nodded. She was just about to turn around when a tremor was suddenly felt under her feet, causing her to stumble a little. She hurriedly grabbed the stone pillar beside her. A shock filled her pretty face. It is transmitted from the quiet room. Yun also paused her footsteps. She sensed a little before her pretty eyes suddenly turned towards the quiet room. Having received the inheritance of Granny Hua, her strength was soaring rapidly. The moment the tremor was transmitted over earlier, she clearly sensed that the quiet room, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly emitting an extremely intense energy fluctuation. Is he about to exit his retreat? Yun muttered softly in her mouth. She softly said, "The activity seems to be a little big, let's leave this place first." After uttering those words, Yun pressed her foot on the ground. She body rushed to the midair. After which, Qinglin and Nailin Yangran hurriedly followed. They stood in the sky. Only then did they see an extremely hot fire pillar slowly curling and rising from the top of the quiet room. Bang! The three figures had just rushed to the sky when the roof of the quiet room below suddenly exploded apart. Hot smoke spread out, causing the temperature all around the place to rise rapidly. When the quiet room was blasted open, a vast and mighty aura that had been quiet for an entire month also slowly spread. Soon after, a clear and long roar suddenly resounded from within the quiet room and charged directly towards the cloud. The roar contained an unusually vast and mighty do qi. Hence, that roar also appeared like thunder that continuously reverberated across the sky, spreading to every corner of the flower sect. Human figures continued to rush out from all over the flower sect when this roar sounded. Numerous figures stood in the sky. Their eyes were shocked as they looked towards the direction that the roar had originated from. The surprise within the eyes of some of the observant individuals turned into shock when they sensed that aura. This is Xiao Yang. His aura, why has it suddenly strengthened so greatly? The strength of this aura has likely reached the peak of the 4-star level. This fellow, has he eaten some special pill? His strength had actually soared to such an extent within a short 1 month. Quite a number of elders from the flower sect involuntarily inhaled a breath of cool air when they sensed the strength of this aura. The rate at which this strength was raised was really too frightening. A full 2 stars. If one was to train normally, it would likely take 10 years of effort to achieve it. Yet, Xiao Yang was actually able to complete it within a short 1 month. He is indeed worthy of being Yarrow Chen's disciple. He's definitely extraordinary. That white-haired old woman, who was the first elder of the flower sect, nodded slightly and muttered while she stood in the sky. The roaring thunder ultimately reached a point where it was about to scatter. At the moment it did so, layers of thick dark clouds suddenly appeared in the blue sky. Wild wind blew across the sky in an unceasing manner. This sudden scene caused everyone to be stunned. Their faces were at a loss. Unusual natural phenomenon. The first elder of the flower sect was also slightly stunned by this scene. A moment later, she appeared to have recalled something. Her eyes suddenly turned towards the direction of the quiet room. A disbelief finally surged onto her eyes. This is the birth of a Tian-class Qi method. When it came to unusual natural phenomenon, they could generally be summarized into 3 types of situation. One was when a high-tier medicinal pill was born. It would attract the pill lightning. The second was when one trained to a certain level. It would attract such a situation. However, this was usually rarely seen. This was because someone who could reach such a level was considered an extremely rare existence even in the entire Do Qi continent. The third possibility was the birth of a Tian-class Qi method or Tian-class Do skill. This birth usually did not mean the reappearance of a Qi method or Do skill. Instead, it was a birth from nothing. An example was creation. Only when some Tian-class Qi method or Do skill was being created would such an unusual natural phenomenon be attracted. The current sky was not covered by pill fragrance. Clearly, it was not the birth of a high-tier medicinal pill. The second possibility could be directly eliminated. Although Xiao Yang was powerful, it was far from sufficient to cause an unusual natural phenomenon. Since this was the case, only the last possibility matched the situation. However, it must be said that this white-haired old woman was indeed experienced. Only a couple of breaths' time had passed, but she had already managed to ascertain the origin of the unusual natural phenomenon through her various guesses. Creating one's own Tian-class Qi method or Do skill. The white-haired old woman was startled as she watched the quiet room that was emitting a white flame in the distance. Even with her calmness, her face was currently filled with a grave and shocked expression. Creating one's own Tian-class Qi method or Do skill. Just how many people in this current continent had the ability to achieve this? Based on common sense, forget about Xiao Yang, even Yarrow Chen, who had advanced into the Ban Sheng class, would likely not possess such an ability. Yet, regardless of how great a disbelief was present in her heart, the situation that appeared in front of her caused her to have no choice but to accept this harsh reality. A moment later, she withdrew her emotion. A bitter smile surfaced on her face. It was indeed the case of the younger generation surpassing the old. Compared to such an outstanding young man, old fellows like themselves could only feel ashamed. No wonder he can be accepted by Yarrow Chen as a disciple. Such a talent is indeed rare. The white-haired old woman sighed softly. Her eyes flickered slightly. After this matter, her heart had truly begun to think highly of Xiao Yang. Although she was considered quite polite to Xiao Yang in the past, that was after all on the account of Yarrow Larrow's face. Xiao Yang being able to defeat Yaohua Liangjun with his 2-star Dozun strength had caused her to be surprised, but that was it. Yaohua Liangjun might appear strong in the eyes of others, but he did not pose the slightest threat. If it was not because Yaohua Liangjun was a member of the Profound Sky Sect, it was likely that she would not have allowed this fellow to leave smoothly back then. Although she had only think highly of Xiao Yang in the past because of Yarrow Larrow, it had completely changed at this moment. Creating one's own Tian-class Qi method or Do skill. This ability was something that even she could not compare with. Xiao Yang had given her too many surprises. It was to an extent that caused her, as the first elder of the Flower Sect, to threat him seriously. This person's future achievement will definitely be extraordinary. Yun Yun's good relationship with him is also beneficial for the Flower Sect. The white-haired old woman smiled faintly when she thought of this. She muttered to herself, "Senior sister, your eyesight is indeed extremely accurate." Seeing the layers of dark clouds spread apart in the sky, all the disciples from the Flower Sect had stunned faces. This change in the weather was far too unpredictable. Of course, there were also some shrewd people whose eyes turned towards the direction where Xiao Yang was undertaking a retreat after muttering for a moment. Such an unusual phenomenon had occurred the moment Xiao Yang was about to leave his retreat. It was likely that no one would believe that these two were unrelated. The quiet room once again trembled in front of the countless number of gazes. A hot chi pillar shot out from within. A human figure was standing steadily with a royal demeanor on the top of this pillar. The one who had appeared was naturally Xiao Yang, who had undertaken a 1-month retreat. At this moment, he was also slightly startled when he saw the unusual phenomenon in the sky. A moment later, he appeared to have understood something. He frowned slightly and gently waved his sleeve. After waving his sleeve, an invisible spiritual ripple immediately spread out from between his brows. When this ripple spread, the layers of dark cloud in the sky also ceased churning. After which, they slowly scattered amidst numerous stunned gazes. The darkness in the sky also gradually disappeared after the final dark cloud disappeared. A warm sunlight once again scattered down and shone on this mountain range that was covered by a sea of flower. Has it evolved to a Tian-class Qi method? Xiao Yang stared at his own palm after the dark cloud scattered. Immediately, he shut his eyes. A thought passed through his mind and the flame mantra was once again circulated. When the flame mantra was circulating, the natural energy within 1,000 feet radius suddenly surged over intensely like floodwaters. Immediately, waves after waves of shocking energy continuously poured into Xiao Yang's body in front of numerous stunned eyes. Xiao Yang's body did not reject these natural energy that were filled with a great amount of impurities. Any impurities would be immediately turned into nothing while the heavenly flame rose. The rate at which Do Qi circulated within his body was also over 10 times more rapid than before. This kind of mad rapidness did not only show itself on the circulating speed. There was also a drastic change in terms of absorption, refinement, accommodation, and other aspects when compared with before. Based on Xiao Yang's current condition, it was likely that he would no longer end up needing to immediately swallow medicinal pills to replenish his Do Qi like in the past should he use the Annihilation Fire Lotus. The current him could really be described as having the capital to squander. A mouthful of turbid air that contained a lot of impurities moved along Xiao Yang's throat and was exhaled. When he sensed an unprecedented feeling of being filled, a joyous smile that could not be suppressed involuntarily surfaced on his face. He might possess the ability to fight across levels, but all of these required the exhaustion of an extremely vast amount of Do Qi. Hence, he had to be careful each time he used them. He was afraid that someone might take advantage of the opening after he use it and enter a weakened state. Fortunately, this kind of worry would likely rarely occur from now onwards unless it was some special circumstances. It can be considered to be a Tien class low-rank Qi method. However, it should have only just broken through the DI class high level. It is rumored that when a true Tien class Qi method is used, it would immediately be able to absorb all of the energy within 1,000 feet for one's own use. What I have activated earlier does have some gap when compared to it. Xiao Yang revealed an expression of deep thought. It was unexpected that evolving to the Tien class would actually be this harsh. Even the bone-chilling flame was only able to get flame mantra to reach the quasi-Tien class Qi method level. Fortunately, regardless of whether it was quasi-Tien class or a true Tien class, it had after all reached that level. This kind of transformation would also be a drastic one. My strength is currently also at the 4-star Dozun level. Xiao Yang sensed the interior of his body. The swallowing of the bone-chilling flame this time around had actually only allowed him to raise his strength by 2-star. Although he was mentally prepared, this kind of result still caused Xiao Yang to be quite dismayed. If other elite Dozuns were to be aware of this thought of his, it was likely that they would immediately spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. 10 years or even decades of training was completed by him within a short 1 month. If he was still dispirited because of it, they would likely have to directly find a stone and knock their heads to death. For star, so be it. After feeling despair for a short moment, Xiao Yang swiftly withdrew his mind. This result was something that he had expected. At this moment, he had already swallowed 4 types of heavenly flames. Although the strength of a heavenly flame was great, anything that was eaten in large numbers would likely result in it being unable to fully unleash its effect like before. Based on Xiao Yang's guess, if he was to swallow a heavenly flame that was ranked 15th and higher at this moment, the effect would likely be extremely weak. It would have difficulty raising his strength by even a star. It looks like I must specifically find those heavenly flames that are ranked at the front when swallowing heavenly flames in the future. Xiao Yang was speechless when he thought until this point. A heavenly flame was it itself rare. Those ranked at the front were extremely rare. Even if one was to find it, attempting to capture and refine it was also extremely difficult. Based on his guess, it appeared that Xiao Yang's path of swallowing heavenly flames in the future would become incomparably difficult. Xiao Yang smiled bitterly, shaking his head and sighed. All he could do was to accept his fate. Although raising his strength by 2-star did not meet the standards of his discerning eyes, a small mosquito was also meet. If he was to use the Skyfire 3 mysterious change with his current strength, he would no longer need to rely on the Annihilation Fire Lotus to battle with Yaohua Liangjun should he end up meeting the latter. Even in a head-on collision, the advantage that Yaohua Liangjun could gain would likely be quite small. Forget about that Yaohua Liangjun, even if I meet that so-called 9th Tianzuan of the Hall of Soul, I will also be able to fight with him and withdraw in one piece. Xiao Yang involuntarily sighed in relief when he thought of this. Ever since he had witnessed the strength of 9th Tianzuan and the others back then, he had been vaguely feeling some pressure within his heart. This fellow was merely just a 9th Tianzuan. Above him definitely had a 7th Tianzuan, 6th Tianzuan, and even the 1st Tianzuan. Fortunately, his current strength had already soared by a certain extent. He might not dare to say that he could be unafraid of these people just because of it, but his heart would at least feel more at ease. There was no need for him to be constantly nervous. Moreover, even if he could not defeat them when they fought in the future, he would definitely let the other party suffer. Just how long are you going to continue dreaming here? A gentle voice resounded helplessly beside Xiao Yang's ear while he was in deep thought. Xiao Yang lifted his head, only to see a beautiful face appearing in front of him. There was even some rebuking expression on her pretty face. It was extremely alluring. Xiao Yang smiled at Yun Yun only to suddenly extend his hand and grabbed Yun Yun's hand. Seeing Xiao Yang acting in this manner in public, Yun Yun's extremely beautiful face became an embarrassing red. She knitted her brows and spoke in an embarrassed and angry manner. "Little bastard, could you have really gotten addicted to acting like a rogue?" Xiao Yang was startled when he heard the embarrassed voice of Yun Yun. He looked at the latter's reddened face and said, "I am helping you look at the Do Chi seal within your body." Yun Yun was startled when she heard this. She continued to stare at Xiao Yang somewhat doubtfully. A moment later, her struggling hand finally weakened. A helpless expression also surfaced on Xiao Yang's face when he saw this. His hand was placed on Yun Yun's arm before he shut his eyes. A trace of spiritual strength flowed along his hand and entered the latter's body. Yun Yun sighed gently when Xiao Yang shut his eyes. However, her face still had an embarrassing red color remaining on it. Regardless of what the intention of this fellow was, this place was ultimately a public one. Many disciples and elders from the flower sect were below. Just how it would look like if they saw this. Xiao Yang slowly opened his eyes while Yun Yun was complaining in her heart. At this moment, there was an additional solemnness on his face. The Do Chi seal within Yun Yun's body caused even him to feel shocked. Based on what teacher had said, that Granny Hua should be an elite dozun whose strength had reached that of an 8 or 9-star dozun. The do chi from her entire lifetime could completely shatter an ordinary dozun. Xiao Yang's eyes flickered while he mused. Yun body did indeed possess a vast and mighty do chi that caused even him to feel shocked. However, these do chi was being completely sealed by an extremely powerful seal. With Yun's strength, she would require quite a long time in order to break the seal and control these vast and mighty do chi. That Granny Hua is too cautious. The seal that she has placed is too strong. With your current strength, the rate at which you can refine it can be a little faster. Xiao Yang released Yun's hand, raised his head and said, "You are also aware that the seal is extremely powerful. With my strength, it is impossible for me to break it. All I can do is to absorb those do chi that seeped out from the seal. Even though this was the case, my training speed is much faster when compared to the past." Yun knitted her brows and said, "It is safer to refine all of these do chi as soon as possible. Otherwise, if you end up meeting a strong person, it is likely that that person might remove the do chi seal without due care for your life." Xiao Yang spoke seriously. All of the do chi left behind by an 8 or 9-star dozun was quite a tempting treasure. It was difficult to be certain that some experts would not end up having other wayward thoughts. Yun also nodded slightly when she heard this. She understood that Xiao Yang would not lie to her. However, it was not that she did not wish to speed up the rate of refinement, but she was really unable to do anything to that seal. "Relax, leave the matter of the seal to me. I will resolve this matter before leaving. Otherwise, I will really be unable to be at ease." Xiao Yang smiled involuntarily and said when he saw her expression. An unknown emotion surged up Yun's heart as she observed the smiling young man in front of her. The feeling of having someone to rely on was really good. She had brought Nalan Yangran and roamed all over the place during these years. Although her strength could be considered to be at the top within the Jianan Empire, it was nothing in this central plains where numerous experts were present. Two ladies who possessed such beauty naturally attracted a lot of attention. Hence, Yun brought Nalan Yangran to join the flower sect. All she sought was some peace. However, she had really never thought about the position of the flower sect's chief. "Thank you." Yun gently inhaled a breath of air. She suppressed the somewhat weak emotion in her heart and whispered. Xiao Yang frowned when he heard this. He stared at the beautiful face and asked, "Is it necessary?" Yun raised her pretty eyes after appearing to hear the displeased tone that Xiao Yang had used. She looked at the frown of the latter before involuntarily smiling. A faint warmth was present in her heart. Xiao Yang felt a little sorry at having caused such a great commotion within the flower sect. He specially apologized to the first elder of the flower sect. Now that the first elder had the intention to befriend Xiao Yang and the Falling Star Pavilion, she would naturally not be concerned about this. Hence, this small matter just passed in this way. The so-called unnatural phenomenon had also gradually faded after the disciples of the flower sect had talked about it for 2 to 3 days. This was also as Xiao Yang desired. He did not wish to be looked at by many strange eyes each time he went out. A faint fragrance lingered within a room that was filled with a pale pink color. At a glance, one would understand that this was likely the room of a certain lady. "I will forcefully tear a crack line later on in order to aid your refinement in the future. It might be a little pain. You must endure it." Xiao Yang looked at Yun, who was seated on the soft bed. His thought also shifted from this room that had a pink color before coughing dryly and said. Yun agreed softly. At this moment, her face was still a little red. This was because even until now, she did not know why she would suddenly become hot-headed and bring Xiao Yang to her own room. It was fine just using any room. Yet, she must bring him here. This was especially case when Xiao Yang displayed a strange expression after just entering this place. It caused her to have the impulse of burying her head into the ground. Xiao Yang laughed dryly when he saw that the tip of Yun's ears was still red. After which, he exhaled a long breath of air. He tossed aside the distracting thoughts and gradually focused his mind. After his mind became focused, Xiao Yang curled his fingers and a wisp of purple-brown flame that contained traces of dense whiteness within it slowly appeared on his finger. This flame was naturally something that was created after having merged the bone-chilling flame with the other flames. Currently, the 4 types of heavenly flames had completely merged together. Both its color and its might had become greater. Moreover, this kind of heavenly flame currently gave one a somewhat unusual feeling. The extremely heat hid a kind of extremely cold force. The difficulty in dealing with it had multiplied by a couple of times. One could imagine the harm it would cause the other party if this kind of unusual force invaded the other party's body when fighting other people. Xiao Yang's expression had become grave when the flame appeared. An instant later, his fingers heavily pressed on Yun's arm in a lightning-like fashion. Although Xiao Yang did not strengthen the temperature of the flame, the high temperature that the body of the flame contained still burnt the clothes on Yun's back into ashes, revealing her naked jade like a luring curve. The coolness that had suddenly appeared on her back also caused Yun Yun to exclaim. Her face reddened immediately. However, a solemn cry that was transmitted from beside her ear caused her to have no choice but to withdraw the ripple within her heart. Focus. Protect your own veins. I am about to break the seal. Yun Yun clenched her silver teeth in the face of this grave cry by Xiao Yang. She forcefully suppressed the fluctuation within her heart and swiftly focused his mind. Xiao Yang's hand, where a flame was lingering on, pointed on Yun Yun's back. That smooth jade-like back immediately revealed a purple-red shot. Waves after waves of hot flames followed this spot and continuously poured into Yun Yun's body. The heavenly flame suddenly invaded in a large-scale fashion. The high temperature also spread, causing Yun Yun to painfully circulate her do qi in a hurried fashion. It wrapped around every vein. Only then did she feel a little better. Under Xiao Yang's control, the heavenly flame quietly shuttled past the many veins before finally reaching the spot in Yun Yun's body where her do qi was sealed. He prepared a little before letting out a cry and charged ruthlessly towards the strong seal. Bang! The two collided. Yun Yun's lovely body paused immediately. The do qi within his body shook intensely at this moment. Waves after waves of intense pain continued to spread from within her body. Xiao Yang's face was grave. The toughness of the seal had exceeded his expectations. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to continue to destroy it. Moreover, if the seal was completely destroyed, the vast and mighty do qi that surged out would instantly destroy Yun Yun's body. Of course, his aim was not this. All he wanted to do was to cut and form a crack line on the seal. With his current strength and the help of the heavenly flame, it should not be too difficult to achieve it. Bang! A continuous amount of flame surged into Yun Yun's body, after which, it collided against the tough seal without fearing death. Numerous low and deep sound repeatedly resounded within Yun Yun's body. That intense pain also became increasingly worse. Fortunately, she was aware that this was a critical matter. She clenched her teeth tightly and did not emit any sound. I do not believe that I cannot even form a crack line on you. Xiao Yang frowned slightly after striking at the seal for a long time to no avail. Immediately, he inhaled a deep breath of air. He could already sense that the spot on the seal where he had attacked had begun to fluctuate. Immediately, he clenched his teeth. An unusually dense flame suddenly charged into Yun Yun's body. Immediately, it formed numerous spinning flames as it violently collided onto the seal that was rippling. Bang! The collision this time around was unprecedented. Powerful force spread apart from the point of collision. The force spread and Yun Yun's face paled almost instantly. A mouthful of fresh blood was spat out. That force was really too powerful. If it was not because she had used the do qi to protect her veins earlier, it was likely that even her veins would have been completely broken during this collision. A mouthful of fresh blood was spat out. However, Yun Yun's aura did not weaken as a result. Instead, waves after waves of powerful do qi fluctuation suddenly surged from within her body. The strength of that fluctuation was such that it even forced back Xiao Yang's finger, which was in contact with Yun Yun's fingers. What powerful do qi! A surprise flashed across Xiao Yang's eyes when his finger was forced away. Yun Yun's shut eyes were suddenly opened as she sat on the bed. Powerful do qi erupted out as though they were real substance. The table a short distance in front emitted a crack sound before shattering into dust. The seal had been broken. A joy surfaced on Yun Yun's face when she saw this scene. She suddenly raised her head. Her eyes looked towards Xiao Yang, only to find that the latter was staring at her with a strange expression. Yun Yun was startled when she saw this gaze of Xiao Yang. Immediately, she lowered her head slightly. Her face became fiery hot almost instantly. This was because the clothes on her body had completely burst apart due to the eruption of her do qi earlier. At that moment, a naked beautiful body sat enchantingly within the room. An exclamation was emitted from Yun Yun's mouth while her face turned completely red. Immediately, her hand was waved suddenly. Wind danced and the soft blanket on the bed flew up before completely wrapping around the alluring body. Yun Yun's expression only became a little better after her lovely body was hidden within the blanket. She lifted her pretty face and stared at Xiao Yang with embarrassment and anger. She demanded, "Why are you still watching?" Although she was currently covered by a blanket, the blanket was quite thin. When it covered over Yun Yun's lovely body, it still ended up revealing an alluring curve. After being set off by the bright red face that was filled with shyness, the scene was sufficient to cause quite a number of men to bleed wildly from their nostrils. Xiao Yang coughed dryly. He withdrew his eyes in an extremely calm manner and said, "This has nothing to do with me. You are the one who blasted it apart." Hearing these words of Xiao Yang, Yun Yun involuntarily felt speechless and furious despite usually being calm. This brat was actually someone who proclaimed innocence despite having taken advantage of her. Xiao Yang did not dare to be overly entangled over this topic when he saw Yun Yun was showing signs of becoming mad. He hurriedly asked, "How do you feel now?" "All right." A crack line has been torn on the seal by you. Currently, there's quite a lot of do-chi continuously flowing out from the seal. This speed is coincidentally within the boundary that I can refine. Yun snapped. However, the redness on her face gradually faded. Yes, that's fine. Xiao Yang nodded slightly. He voiced his thoughts. The do-chi that is left behind by that granny Hua is really too frightening. If you can completely refine it, you might be able to reach the height of hers when she was alive. Moreover, you are still young. There is a great amount of room for you to improve. Should you end up gaining some great opportunity in the future, it is not impossible for you to even reach the Dosheng class. Dosheng. Yun was involuntarily startled when she heard this legendary height. Immediately, she shook her head helplessly. That matter was too far away. Being able to leap to the Do-Zun class during these years was already a great blessing that the heavens had given her. As for whatever Dosheng, she had really never thought about it. I have quite a number of enemies in the Central Plains. Moreover, each of them are extremely fierce. Haha, if you become an elite Dosheng in the future, I can take shelter under this big tree of yours. Xiao Yina joked. Yun looked at the young face, which was covered with a warm smile, in a stunned manner when she heard Xiao Yang's joke. She was a little quiet and felt a heartache. Everyone could only see his glory and achievement on the surface. However, they forget just how much hard work and effort he had put in to reach this level. When she first met Xiao Yang back then, this youth, who appeared tender but a little stubborn, dared to train within the dangerous magical beast mountain range. After all the storm all these years, the danger that he had experienced was also countless number of times greater than that at the magical beast mountain range back then. I will refine Granny Hua's do-chi as soon as possible, and I'll also spend effort to slowly control the flower sect. Yun's entire body appeared to have shrunk under the thin blanket as his soft voice was emitted. Xiao Yang was startled when he heard these somewhat baffling words of Yun. He watched the pretty face and finally appeared to have understood something. He was momentarily speechless. A favor from a beauty was something that was most difficult to accept. The atmosphere within the room had suddenly become a little enchanting. A moment later, Xiao Yang let out a dry cough and broke the silence. After which, he took out a jade bottle from within the storage ring. Some purple-brown danwans were stored within the jade bottle. An extremely hot energy was vaguely emitted from the medicinal bottle. These are flame-leaving pills that I have refined. Each of them contained a trace of strength from a heavenly flame. You can consume one when you refine the do-chi of the seal in the future. It will aid you in increasing the speed of refinement. At the same time, it will also allow your do-chi to be refined until it is extremely pure. Xiao Yang placed the jade bottle gently on the bed and smilingly spoke to Yun. Yes. Yun received the jade bottle and nodded with a slight smile. I will leave tomorrow. If you end up meeting some trouble that you cannot resolve in the future, you can come to the Falling Star Pavilion to look for me. You are leaving tomorrow, huh? Yun said. The hand which she used to hold the jade bottle tightened a little when she heard this. I cannot remain here for too long. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I might end up attracting the experts from the Hall of Soul. At that time, I would end up implicating the flower sect. Xiao Yang spoke seriously. Yun was not someone who failed to see the larger picture. Although she felt some dismay in her heart, she still ended up nodding. She softly said, yes, you should be careful. Xiao Yang smiled and nodded. He once again gave Yun some instruction before turning around and left this lady's room, where a fragrance lingered. Yun's silver teeth bit her red lips as she watched Xiao Yang's back, which was leaving. She softly muttered, it has been so many years, but I'm still unable to get rid of this little enemy. Since I am unable to escape, I shall put in the effort again for you. Originally, Yun was not really interested in increasing her strength. All she wanted to do was to find a quiet place to pass the rest of her life when she came to the Central Plains. However, who could have expected that even though this was the case, that person, who was buried deep within her heart, would once again appear in front of her. Only when she met him again did she realize that it was impossible for this feeling to be forgotten with the flow of time. Instead, it would be brewed by time until it became increasingly mellow. She would not say anything regarding such a feeling. All that she wanted was to remain behind him and quietly providing him some help. This was because Yun was aware that Xiao Yang was carrying too much on his back. He was also too tired. She wanted to help share a little of his burden. After having resolved the problem of the seal for Yun, Xiao Yang continued to remain within the flower sect for one day. After which, he led Qinglin and Yun to bid farewell to the first elder of the flower sect. The first elder of the flower sect felt a little regretful with regards of Xiao Yang's swift departure. She wanted to get him to stay, but seeing that Xiao Yang had made up his mind, it was inappropriate for her to stop him. All she could do was to allow the two to leave. After saying his goodbye, Xiao Yang and Qinglin directly left the flower sect. After which, the latter summoned the 9 serene deep-ground python and once again hurried towards the Falling Star Pavilion. Cloud was absent in the azure sky within thousands of kilometers. Suddenly, an enormous black figure rushed past the distant sky with lightning-like speed. A deafening rushing wind sound rumbled continuously in the sky, attracting quite a number of gazes. This rapidly moving enormous black figure was naturally Xiao Yang and Qing Lin, who had left the flower sect for about 2 days. Both of them were basically traveling during these 2 days and did not take many breaks along the way. Although using the 9 serene deep-ground python to travel was a little eye-catching, it would seldom attract any trouble. This was because everyone knew of the strength of the 9 serene deep-ground python, which was one of the 3 great tribes in the magical beast world. Unless there was some special circumstances, otherwise no one would easily offend them. Young Master Xiao Yang, we have basically left the territory of the flower sect's influence. In another few days, we should be able to reach the Falling Star Pavilion. Qing Lin's eyes swept in all directions while standing on the enormous body of the 9 serene deep-ground python. After which, she turned her head and spoke to Xiao Yang, who was seated behind her. Understood. Xiao Yang nodded slightly. His hand rubbed the 9 serene deep-ground python under him and the image of a 7-colored huge heaven-swallowing python flashed across his mind. Kaylin. I wonder if your womb really possessed the bloodline of the Xiao clan. A complicated expression flashed across Xiao Yang's eyes when he thought about Cai Lin. He wondered how this Queen Medusa, who had once chased after him until he was forced to flee, was. With her strength, it was likely that she would have few opponents who could match her in that region, right? Young Master Xiao Yang. The pretty face of Qing Lin by the side changed a little while Xiao Yang had sunk into his memory. She softly cried out. What is it? Xiao Yang was pulled back from his thoughts by the cry. He was startled as he asked. Something seems to be wrong, Qing Lin softly replied. Xiao Yang's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard this. His gaze slowly swept around him. At this moment, they were in the sky above a sparsely populated mountain range. However, it was surprising that there was actually not the slightest magical beast roar in this mountain range. It was as though the place was a death region. Xiao Yang slowly stood up. He got Qing Lin to halt the 9 serene deep-ground python. After which, his eyes paused on an empty space a short distance in front. He spoke faintly, since you have come, why are you hiding yourself? Don't you agree? Yaohua Liangjun. Brat, your perception is quite good. The space in front became distorted after Xiao Yang's words sounded. Immediately, a couple of figures appeared from nowhere. At the same time, a vast and mighty aura also spread over from all directions. There were a total of 4 people who had appeared. Amongst them was Yaohua Liangjun, who had suffered a blow from the annihilation fire lotus of Xiao Yang back then. The other 3 were all expressionless elders in grey robes. The auras of these 3 people were not any weaker than Yaohua Liangjun. Looking at the badge on their chest, they were surprisingly all from the Profound Sky Sect. Xiao Yang, you have ruined an important matter of my Profound Sky Sect. Do you really think you can just leave like this? Do you think that my Profound Sky Sect do not dare to do anything to you just because Yarou Chen had advanced to a Ban Sheng? Yaohua Liangjun gently flapped the foldable fan in his hand. The smile on his face contained a dense emotion. Xiao Yang glanced at this fellow and spoke indifferently. You are able to wait for so long, I think that someone has informed you, right? For example, Hua Jin of the Flower Sect. Xiao Yang's eyes turned towards the forest below after his voice sounded. A figure had appeared from that spot. It was Hua Jin from the Flower Sect. At this moment, the latter was staring at him with a face filled with murderous intent. She coldly laughed. You have ruined a big matter of this, chief. Today, you shall use your life as compensation. As for that slut Yun, this chief will finish her off sooner or later. Xiao Yang, just surrender and return with the old me to the Profound Sky Sect. On the account of Yarou Chen's face, my Profound Sky Sect will treat you well. Otherwise. That grey-robed elder, who was the leader, opened his mouth faintly at this moment. A dense killing intent had suddenly surged in his last sentence. Otherwise, this place shall be where your bones will be buried today. This video will end here.